Hi, everyone, and welcome to Marginalized Authors in the Found Family Trope. My name is Basil Wright, and my pronouns are they, them. And with me today is a lovely assortment of panelists ready to talk about this particular subject and themselves. So we'll start things off with Chelsea Lockhart.
Hello, everyone. If you've never seen me before, my name is Chelsea, and I write books about Black girls who aren't all that nice. And that's how I start TikToks because I get nervous when I talk sometimes. So here we are. My name is Chelsea. I go by C.M. Lockhart on the interwebs, and I'm an author, I'm a podcaster, I'm a YouTuber, and I am excited to be here. So I have two books currently, well, one book out. Second one is coming. First one is We Are the Origin, and the second one is this lovely book over here, We Are Dying Gods. And it's a series about a group of assassins who have to work together to save their gods and their realm from destruction. So second one is coming out in August, and I'm really excited to be talking about found families. So I'm glad to be here.
That book sounds super exciting. My list of books to purchase and then go in the infinite to be read pile grows. Next, I'll get there one day. Next up is RM Virtues.
Hey everyone, I am a fantasy romance author. I'm also really bad at intros, but I'm going to do my best. So I currently have six books out, I think, including my bestseller, which is right here. No, right here. That's Sing Me to Sleep Paralysis Demon. And it's a monster romance, obviously, if you couldn't get that part after the Sleep Paralysis Demon reveal. And also I have my flagship series available, which is the Gods of Hunger series. It's a queer BIPOC retelling of the Greek mythology. And the first one is Drag Me Up with trans Hades and trans Persephone. Um, and then I also have book four in that series coming out later this year, as well as my book, What We Call Worship, which is Nawa or Aztec, as we know it, myth retelling. Um, and that will be hopefully available this summer. But you can find me on the interwebs at Twitter, Tumblr, TikTok, Instagram at RM Virtues.
Great, wonderful. And we got to connect later about that Greek myth stuff because I got my own stuff in the works and it's always fun to find people who like retellings. Oh, goodness, exciting. Uh, so next up is Laura Wells.
Hi, I'm Laura Galán-Wells, and if you hear rumbling, there's a thunderstorm coming through, so if I disappear, that's why. I write young adult and middle grade. I don't have a book out. I'm 2 weeks on submission with my first novel, which is a young adult that is inspired by Mexican mythology, where Texas and Mexico are under a mysterious dome and people have been turning into monsters. So that's kind of the vibe there. And then I have a middle grade that we're preparing to go on sub soon. And it's an adventure kind of volcano island situation, more Mexican mythology. And a girl that's just found out she's going to be the next drowning sacrifice. And then later this year, I have a comic book coming out with Chispa Comics, which is under Scout Comics. And it's gonna be an origin story of a superhero girl called Molt. Well, that's her superhero name. And yeah, that's about me. I'm here in Texas writing speculative fiction.
Wonderful, wonderful. I love a good dome story. So many fun things and terrible things happen when you're trapped under a dome. Next up is George.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. I'm George Jreije. I'm the Arab American author of the Shad Hadid series. So I write middle grade as well as young adult. I also write graphic novels and a forthcoming graphic novel in 2025 called Tarek's Bizarre Adventure. So I'm just really eager to talk here. Found family is near and dear to my heart and a big continuous stream across pretty much everything that I write.
Wonderful, excellent. Cannot wait. So many wonderful books coming out, so many books to read. Next is Jessica Lewis.
Hi, my name is Jessica Lewis. I am a receptionist and author from Alabama. I wrote Bad Witch Burning that came out in 2021, and my 2023 YA Monstrous will be out on September 12th, available wherever books are sold. I also write middle grade under the pen name Jazz Taylor, and I have Meow or Never, which came out in 2021, and Starting from Scratch. And that came out in well, it's still April. It came out this month. So you can get all of those. Well, you can get both of the middle grades in the Scholastic Book Fair right now. So very excited to talk about found families.
Wonderful, wonderful. Love a good cat pun. But and so last but certainly not least is Noreen.
Hey everyone, my name is Noreen. I am a brown South Asian writer, and my debut title, The Misarrangement of Sana Saeed, is coming out in October. It is a romance with rom-com-ish vibes. I don't know. The rom-com is such a weird term because comedy is implied, and like I think I'm funny, but I don't know if people will think I'm funny or not. So I mean, I hesitate to say it's a rom-com. I want to say to me it's funny with romance. And it's a loose retelling of Persuasion where a woman named Sana decides to get in an arranged marriage because it's her mother wants her to be a guardian for her younger autistic brother. And as soon as she starts the process, her old childhood friend comes into the picture who she's had a crush for, but they have a family feud, so it's kind of a little bit Romeo Juliet-ish too. And he's her boss too. So how she navigates family and like goes after the guy that she loved so many years ago and sort of falls in love with again. So that's the sort of premise of the book. But yeah, found families is very near and dear to my heart in terms of being an immigrant here, and sort of finding a family here. And I came here like with two suitcases, my whole life in two suitcases. So sort of finding my own family. So I would love to talk about it, and thank you for having me.
Yes, welcome, welcome. This is going to be an excellent panel. So let's go ahead and get things started with the first question, which is, why is the found family trope common in marginalized stories?
Um, I feel like it's common in at least in my world, right? My personal opinion. I feel like it's common because, when your community is so important to a lot of, Black and brown people. And it's just kind of like that's the thing that keeps us together. And we have so much shared history. And specifically, within America, there's it has a history of oppression. And when you know that someone's been in something with you and experiences the same thing as you, it kind of builds an unspoken camaraderie where it's just like, there's so much where it's just like with a look, you can be like, you see this? Yeah, I see this. And I don't know you. We've never spoken to each other before, but we are automatically on the same page. And I think within stories, especially because, we have stories automatically come with obstacles. And so when you have characters who are looking for people to are going to help them and support them, I feel like that found family of like, we are in this together. We are facing this insurmountable task together. It becomes like we've been through this together and now we're fam. Like you almost died, I almost died, we didn't. And so now we're bonded for life. And I feel like it's just a common thing that translates very easily from real life into fiction, into written work.
I feel like there's different different marginalizations that we all have. Like, obviously, a lot of us here have, the person of color marginalization. But I think within our different subsets of marginalizations too, like you tend to find families just in real life, right? Whether that's, in your writing communities, your real life, other social or work communities. And I think that we just have this drive to also just build that safety and affection into our books as we're writing. And, you know, we want our characters to have that same kind of sense of community. And I think safety is just a really big kind of theme in found families where, well, definitely in my books, like my people are going through trauma because I put them through trauma because I'm evil. And, you know, they have to find somebody to lean on. And there's, I think that safety that you feel is just something that you want to find for your characters. So you put them in those situations where they're going to have to find others who think like them or are in the same situation.
Yeah, building upon that, you know, in order to effectively write these characters, we have to draw from our own experiences and really put a piece of ourselves into the work, into the character, right? Especially when you write children's literature, with children, there's an inherent need to belong and to find that group. And especially if you're from a marginalized identity or a minority group, it's hard to find that, especially as a kid. You retain that memory, and so it finds its way back into the story when you're drawing that piece of yourself. And readers who also share those identities, and actually, this is pretty universal, no matter who you are, especially if you're a fan of children's literature in particular, you retain that need to belong. And so it's very satisfying when you read it and the character overcomes obstacles to get there. And so I feel it's a very natural thing to want to write and gravitate to, whether you're from a marginalized identity or not, but especially if you were from that marginalized identity and if you retain that memory as a child of having wanted to belong and maybe being just a little bit or a lot of bit, right, alienated. So I really do think that, you know, building off of what both of you have said very effectively, it's just that natural need to belong. And it really manifests, and I could speak to in particular with children's literature, what I predominantly write, it especially manifests there.
I also think sometimes when you go through struggles, um, when you see other people who are maybe like you or not like you go through things, and you sort of understand where they're coming from. I talk from an immigrant perspective on, you know, how my mom couldn't speak English. And then I saw my neighbors, you know, who were not from India, but then their mom had a similar issue. So like, you know, like they would talk, my mom and my neighbors, and they would like not even talk in like English. They would just like use gestures toward each other, and they would go for walks and things like that. But like, you know, sometimes when you struggle with similar things, there is like, you know, that togetherness that comes with it, and this, you know, shared pain that comes with it.
Great. Yeah, I think we've really started a good discussion here with that question. And so, building on that, how does found family relate to joyful representation? And I think some of you have touched on this a little bit, but if anyone wants to elaborate further, please feel free to do so.
Well, if y'all don't mind me jumping in again, I think kind of building off of what everyone added of like this need to belong, I also think that part of that joy that you're talking about comes from the fact that like being around people where you don't need to necessarily explain like your struggle to them, and like you can just exist. And so it's just kind of like if we have this thing in common, there are other parts of me that are allowed to exist and be explored without having to like focus on this one thing that in other spaces might make me different. And just being able to like come together and just be like, okay, you know, like like Laura said, we all have different areas of marginalization. And for myself, I can speak like as a Black woman. So it's very nice to be in other spaces with other Black women where it's just like, okay, yes, we're Black and we're women. So social hierarchy, not anywhere near the top of it, right? But also like we're still funny, we're still creative, we're still, you know, very like smart mouthed and can have a good time and can laugh. And it's just kind of like we're not necessarily, I don't want to say trying to dismantle the patriarchy in this moment, but not necessarily having to be quite so mindful as you do when you're outside of your safe spaces. Cause kind of like George said, like you find a space where it's like you want to belong and you feel safe. And I feel like the joy comes from when you feel safe to explore, you feel safe to take risks, you feel safe to like, you know, push the boundaries and see what else there is. And it's just kind of like, it's fun to really get behind the layers of someone without feeling like you have to like break down all their defenses when you know that, you know, we have the same defenses. You know, it's just kind of like a camaraderie, I want to say. And it's just it's something that's very hard to explain, and I feel like that shows up in books because it's just like I feel like everybody wants to feel that joy, and I feel like that's the reason why a lot of people take to books in the first place, because it's just like, this is a place where I can create this friendship, I can create other people and other characters who have been through similar things and reach other people in the world who I may have never seen, may have never met, may have never held a conversation with, but they will read about this character and they will understand exactly what it is that I was trying to convey. And I feel like that in and of itself is another kind of joy that isn't necessarily always talked about, you know?
I also think of it as like a collective thing. Like, you know how people watch sport together, and when their team wins, like there's a big roar and everybody celebrates. I sort of think that's what sometimes we crave as human beings, like finding that connection with other people with similar things that they care about. And then when you overcome that, there's a sort of like a joy that comes, collective joy, if you may. For example, in it, like similar to a team winning, you know. And I think that that's beautiful, you know, in communities, immigrant communities, or you know, all over.
I agree. When you said the team winning, the thing that popped in my mind is the meme of, or the GIF, whichever one you call it, of Issa Rae, where she's like, "I'm rooting for everyone Black." It's just kind of like, yeah, that's that camaraderie, that's that feeling. That's like everybody on your sports team is winning. Like, yeah, I want everybody to win. So I definitely agree with that 100%.
And you know, it's a very natural thing as well. And I kind of alluded to this earlier, but like studies have actually found that the number one measure of longevity along life is your social interactions. And so having those social interactions and finding a community and sticking with that community has proven more useful to individuals like living a long life than any other factor. And so like it is kind of that wish fulfillment to have that at the, you know, at the end of the journey, at the end of the book, that you found your community, you've retained that community, you've saved your community, whatever it is related to that found family. And so again, it's just one of those things that we gravitate to. We all love kind of that loner character, but it just doesn't necessarily feel that joyous unless, and I think that especially coming from communities of color where we value the community unit over the individual, as is sometimes the case, especially in the West, that's like a wish fulfillment for us. And it just, nothing hits better. And so it's like they are synonymous, right? Joyous endings and finding that found family, they're one and the same.
Absolutely. And it kind of reminds me of like how everybody, I don't know, say secretly, because I don't know how secret it is, but like how everyone can like watch something, and I'll say Boy Meets World because that's the thing that pops in my mind. But like how we all kind of want that friend where it's just like we're with them our entire lives. Like they are our friend, our community. Like we can trust them with anything and everything. And there are so many people who have that desire, and why so many of us have to be told a lot of times that, like, hey, you meet your real friends later in life, like in college. It's very rare for people to be like, oh, we've been in diapers and here we are in our 60s and we're still the bestest of friends. I think a lot of us, like you said, we crave that connection with other people, and that longevity and that trust and that history and that shared like experience in life, where it's just like, I think there's also something very comforting that comes from, I don't have to explain to you who I am because you've been with me long enough to know who I am. So it's just like you get to a point where it's just like we know each other, like I see you like really for who you are. And I think on some basic level, everyone craves that, because like even babies, like as soon as they're born, they're reaching for someone, for warmth, for touch, for something to connect to, but I'm gonna be quiet. I talk a lot. Sorry.
Building on what you both have recently said, I'm reminded of just kind of Western storytelling generally, and how often we talk about how, like George was saying, like the focus on individualism and such. And I feel like a lot of, especially people of color communities, like have a much more emphasis on staying together. Like the communities stay together longer, people stay longer with their families, that kind of thing. And I'm kind of thinking as I go here, but I'm kind of wondering if part of this too, of that like desire to have a found family story, is that you don't necessarily frame yourself as like, this is what I'm doing for myself, or I'm going to go out into the world and go far from my community to be independent. Like I feel like there's just this more of this push of like, or not a push, but like more of a pull towards including those around you. And or at least, I mean, that's how it is in Latino communities for sure. It's, you're not just thinking like, how, what am I going to do in my career far away from my family? It's like, oh, maybe we can all live in the same house, wouldn't that be nice? And more that kind of assumption or draw, assuming everything's healthy. And so I don't know if any of this that I'm saying is making sense, but oh, my weather alarm's going off. I'm just wondering if maybe we're more likely to want to form those communities and families of characters with like more characters, you know what I mean? Than just the one lone going off on an adventure by themselves character.
I get what you mean 100%, because it's just kind of like you want to support where you came from, like especially when you have those stories. I think you touched on something specifically with found families, because you mentioned it's like when it's healthy. And I think a lot of times with found families, it comes from a place of, we want to see this character find their home, find their people, because a lot of times in stories they're coming from a place where it's like it's not healthy, or they don't, by choices that aren't their own, don't have their family anymore. And so that leads them to wanting to supplement that, because it's just like everybody wants someone. And then on the flip side of that, when you have stories where it's just like characters do come from this really tight-knit background, as the reader, sometimes you're rooting for them to be like, okay, but you're still a person, like you're still allowed to like love people outside of your immediate that you've always known. And that, I feel like that's part of where the found family comes in, because it's like there's always this aspect of like real family where it's just like, yeah, especially like you said, when it's healthy, you want to be with them, you want to support them, you want to continue to grow with them. But then there's also this aspect of, who are you outside of the people who have defined you? Because when you grow up in a certain space, you are an amalgamation of all of your experiences. And when all of your experiences are with the same people, there's this desire, whether like as a reader, reading about a character as a person, to find that space where it's just like, okay, but who am I when I'm not being the person that I've always been, that these people who have helped shaped me to who I am, when I'm not being this person, when you have that space, and I think that's part of the appeal of found families, because it comes with safety and freedom in the same breath.
And I think going off of what I mean, Laura was saying too, and the idea that it relates to joyful representation is that you can also imagine, especially if you're from a family where you don't put yourself first and you're always doing for other people and having to consider other people in all of your decisions, and those people don't always appreciate it or know what you've done or sacrificed for them. The idea that you can then recreate that same family that actually appreciates those things from your characters, I think it brings a lot of fulfillment that you would want to see in real. Me often writing the found family trope, it isn't about finding a new family. It's about, what if I met the people I already love at times in their lives when they can love me back the way that I deserve? Or what if I know that I love, in different situations where they appreciate what I've done, or can actually, you know, take the consideration when they're talking to me or having a conversation with me. So I think, that too, in writing this trope, it kind of fulfills that desire to have your family look the way that you wanted it to. And obviously that is, difficult. Like, for me, coming from both, the black side of family and being raised really by the Mexican side of my family, there was always this, there was a lot of hardship. They didn't get along. So now imagine that you could be together and have one big family that got along and each other, this and that. So to be that idea of like, what if we could bridge, the gaps between certain people.
Okay, great. Thank you, RM and everyone. Jessica, did you want to add something to the question currently on deck?
Oh, I was just gonna say that I agree that there's something really appealing about picking your family. You can't control who you're related to by blood, but it is a very nice feeling to be able to say you and I are like vibing, and so we can be a family. And then you can, if you need to, you can cut out the toxic members of your actual family that you don't get along with because you have someone who is in your corner. And I've always found that really nice, in real life and in books.
Yes, definitely. And we're kind of touching on this a little bit, so this makes it a perfect segue into the next question, which is how does the found family trope subvert family dynamics?
I think at this point for us, I mean, for all of uh marginalized people that are writing it, it's a form of resistance at this point, because like, George said earlier, in the West, individualism is actually a big problem and it's growing stronger every day. So every day that we decide we want to be, community oriented or family oriented, it feels like resistance. It feels like we're going against what's expected of us living in America, and, turning our, the other cheek, or turning our faces away from what's going on. And, you you're pushing this, we're getting pushed, excuse me, pushed into this culture of, we shouldn't care about other people, we shouldn't care about their struggles, we shouldn't care about what they're going through, we should just let them drown. And every single day, in believing, in community, you have to decide, actively decide, make a decision to care about people and to continue caring about people, even when everybody is telling you you shouldn't, and making you not want to. Because I mean, in the economy we live in, and the systems we live under, it's very difficult because we can barely take care of ourselves. So it would be easier to stop caring about other people, to abandon our families and our communities, you know, to go through what we're going through, and then just shut down and say, what, every man for himself. But we don't do that. So I think this is definitely a form of resistance in what we're living in right now.
Yeah, I want to build off of that because RM, that was so wonderfully put. You know, the one thing that found families they teach, and I think a lot of us try to impart important messages through our literature, is empathy. And anyone who is a teacher or works in, you know, developing empathy in other individuals can tell you that it is a practice. And part of that practice can be reading literature that fosters, you know, the tendencies towards empathizing and feeling for our fellow human, right? And true to what you said, RM, as well, society does kind of try and break that apart and put us into our own individual buckets, whether it intends to or not, it's just structured that way. And so, in fostering that empathy and writing those stories that, in one way or another, whether we intend to or not, through found families, preach that message of, hey, you know, coming together, understanding each other's struggles and what each other is going through, and how we can fit into those communities with each other, we are resisting kind of that pull against empathy.
I 100% agree with all of that. And I want to add to it that it also, you know, subverts expectations in the sense of, you know, it fights back against a stereotype that, you know, a lot of Black and brown communities are like broken homes. And it's just kind of like when you have that found family, it's just kind of like family can look more than one way. And by writing it, you paint this picture of, you know, just because it doesn't necessarily look what one group of people expect it to look like doesn't mean that it's broken, doesn't mean that it's not functional, doesn't mean that this community itself is not, you know, raising complete and whole people. It's just, it looks differently and the priorities are different. And I think it's important, like RM said, to like resist and to show that like this is real, this is our lived experiences, because, you know, as authors, despite, you know, our best efforts, we put pieces of ourselves into our work. And like George said earlier, we pull from what we have lived and what we know. And, you know, it adds to also what he just said, you know, it teaches empathy and it shows that we have empathy not only for, you know, ourselves in the place that we grew up, but also for other people that we are around, and shows that we form bonds that are just as strong. You know, the phrase, you know, blood is thicker than water, you know, but I feel like so many times people forget that the other half of that is, but, you know, what is it? The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, you know? So it's just kind of like when you take it into full context, it's just kind of like, it just depends on what perspective you're looking at it from.
I think also to jump off of that, beyond the empathy as well, and this is kind of a segue, but we're also learning so much from our found family that we didn't have in our original families. You know, to your point about being whole and so forth, as we grow up with our found family as well. You know, even if we do have this common marginalization, we just all still have such unique experiences. And a huge benefit of the found family is that you can have, you know, all that input from everyone's experiences, and it doesn't have to have been, you know, good experiences that people had. You know, there's the growth that we all have from our different traumas and so forth, and you know, we use that to help heal each other's cracks as we're coming together.
Yeah, I really like what you said, Laura, about us learning different things from different people. And I feel like the more found family that you have, the more of a well-rounded person you are, especially when you can see from different viewpoints and from different experiences, even within your own group, like you said. Um, because I think Chelsea was saying that we all grow up within with certain people, and so their thoughts end up becoming our thoughts when we're younger, and then when we get older, that's our opportunity to kind of branch out and see what the world has to offer. But if you stay within your own family group, you'll never experience anything new. So I do think it is important, um, just in general, for you to have a found family outside of your own regular family.
Yeah. So this has really generated some excellent discussion. I love it immensely. So many wonderful, lovely answers to that question. Next up is let's see. Both of these are very good. I'm trying to decide which one to ask first. We touched on this. What I'm loving about this discussion is that we're actually touching on so many different topics at once because this is just such a expansive subject to talk about. But what do all of you think are the different forms that found family can take? So as like an example of sort of like the dynamics in play, found families could be like friends, partners in crime. Personally, I think to some degree it could be, the hero and their lifelong nemesis, honestly, kind of like a Magneto Professor X situation where it's like they're definitely friends. Friends. So, what do y'all think are the different forms that found family can take?
So I love that movie called Waitress, where, she sort of is jilted by her husband, whatever, and she goes to this new town and she starts like her life all over again. I like the idea, like I like that because then she finds people that accept her for who she is and all the decisions she's made in the past. And she finds a little community of the people who are not going to judge her and are going to support her while she, stands back on her feet because she's pregnant at that point and things like that. So like I like those tales of fallen, well, not fallen, but you know what I'm saying? Like quote unquote, people who've made mistakes, but then, start over and then sort of find other people's to lift them up and, help them through their journey. Because we're all human, we make mistakes, there's decisions we've taken, everybody's taken in their lives that we're not perfect. And, we have to, as adults, suffer the consequences of such. And how to get back on your feet and find your people who will support you through it.
I 100% agree with that. And I also want to add that I think a found family can look like whatever it needs to look like, because ultimately it boils down to the people who see you for who you are and who you are growing into becoming and can appreciate that for better, for worse. Because like you said, even with, Professor X and Magneto, it's just like they stood on opposite ends of the spectrum for what they thought was right. And even so, they could look at each other with respect and be like, but I can acknowledge that while we are different, I still see you for who you are. And I can respect the fact that you are standing in what you believe to be right, even if it's not necessarily what I believe. Because I also think about, I watch a lot of cartoons, so y'all don't judge me too harshly for what I'm about to say, right? But I watch a lot of cartoons and I watch anime. And the one that also came to mind is like Phineas and Ferb. I don't know if y'all ever watched it, but Dr. Doofenshmirtz and Perry the Platypus, they are definitely found family. They understand each other like no one else. And it's just kind of like, yes, they have a rivalry, but it's just like they understand what this relationship is, and they lean into it and they rely on it, because there are episodes where Dr. Doofenshmirtz is like, okay, Perry, like I went through the plan, where are you? And there are episodes where Perry is just like, oh, he's not doing the evil thing, like I'm surveilling him and he's not doing it. Like you rely on that relationship, and I think it can take on whatever form like it needs to. So like in my book, my found family is, they're all assassins and they all are highly dysfunctional, but they appreciate and they love each other, right? Like, cool, we can hang out and we can have fun, but this character is still going to go off somebody and then we're going to come back and have dinner. That's just what it is. And I think it's important to just have people where it's just like it's fun, but also like you understand each other, because also assassins wouldn't work if everybody in the group wasn't an assassin, because it'd be like, wait a second, you're gonna go like just past tense somebody like right now, people would have questions. But yeah, I think it can and should look like whatever it needs to, because I'm also thinking of like anime, and I don't know if y'all watch anime, but like there's a whole genre of it called like isekai, which literally just means character died and went to another world. And it's just like every single time they are creating a brand new family where they're at. And one of my favorite ones is like that time I got reincarnated as a slime, And the little slime literally creates an entire village where it's just like, it's goblins, it's dire wolves, it's it's orcs, and it's like all these different people coming together around this one little slime, and like that's his family, that's who he protects. And I'm not going to ramble about anime. I'm just saying that there are a lot of different examples of it, and it can really look like anything.
Yeah, I'm actually a huge fan of this trope of like, all these people get into a situation that, like, whether it was by their own fault or not, now they kind of have to band together to figure it out. Like, How to Get Away with Murder. I was really into that show just because you had like six just exhausted law students who are like, well, we're together now. We're tied together for life now. There's nothing y'all can do about it because we just unalive someone together, or helped cover it up after the fact. And like, we're gonna do it again in season 2, 3, 4. So we're kind of stuck together. So I really appreciate that, because it's just a thing of like, it's also that kind of ambiguity of like the morally gray character of like, yeah, in their heads, and like in people's heads, it's probably okay what they did, or they did it for the right reasons, but like the law isn't going to see it that way, right? So it's like you're protecting these people because you understand why they did it, or your morals align with theirs, and like law doesn't equal morality, but it's still the law as we have it right now. So you kind of have to take that into consideration when people you love, or even people you barely liked at the time, do something wild, and you're like, yeah, but he's right, so I'm going to help him. And then you have to kind of, sit on that. You have to take it, own that, and agree that now you're stuck with these people. And, sometimes your relationship gets better. Sometimes it just works as well as it can when it needs to. And either way, it's still, these are the people you're calling. Like, even if like, it's that sort of showing up at somebody's door with, I didn't know where else to go. And it's like, yeah, you barely like each other, but you're in this together now, which really does kind of reflect how normal families can, like, I mean, not normal, but, like dynamic families, your blood family can still also work that way because you haven't talked to whoever. And that's especially like me coming from a really, really massive Mexican family and not being in touch with everybody in that family, but reconnecting with people later on in life when we're better at being people, like we're better people, so we can kind of talk to each other and have adult conversations now, and we're not, as dysfunctional as our elders were, or whatever. I think that that's kind of really a plus on that side of like, yeah, it can definitely take whatever shape it needs to. And sometimes it's gonna look really weird and off-putting to other people, but if it works for you, like that's what it has to be.
I'm a huge anime fan, Chelsea, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I've definitely seen that show. So, it does kind of bother me that when they do die, they never think of their old family back home. That's a tangent.
Sorry.
They never do. That always
Never.
bothers me.
No one's trying to leave the fantasy world. No one's trying to get back home. No one's trying to send a letter, smoke signals, nothing.
Never. They're just like, oh, well, I'm dead. Anyway. So,
they'll move on. I will too.
That's a tangent. I just wanted to add that I really do agree with what everyone's saying. In my book, Monstrous, found family is a murder girly and her giant snake friend. So, it just it can look however you want it. And like you were saying, RM, that it's kind of weird to her friends. They're like, that's a snake. What are you doing? You just have to let it roll. You have to do what works for you. And her giant snake friend, that relationship works for them. So they hang out, they kill people. It's great. It's a fun time.
I just need to add that I absolutely want to read this book. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, September 12th.
Snake friends who kill people. Like, that sounds right up my alley. So
exactly. Yeah. I love the idea of assassin family too. So
she also has a giant pet shader that eats people.
Beautiful. I'm in.
Yeah.
Just to jump off of what Jessica was saying about not necessarily remembering or thinking about your family. I was just thinking back to when I was writing one of my novels that has a found family that just like takes off when things go badly, very dystopian. And some of the feedback I got was like, aren't they missing their family? Like, why don't you have them being really sad about missing their family? And I realized like I was doing what I've always seen in movies and books. Like they take off with their found family and they're not thinking about their family at all. Like they're not talking about missing them, worrying about them back in the dystopian area or whatever's going on with them. Like it's found family time. Like we're just together now, and who cares about those people? So I did work some of that into my book after that comment, but I just thought it was funny that it's like, how do you balance that? Like, do you just completely put your focus on now we're a found family, or do you, when you're writing, still have them, through their thoughts or dialogue, kind of like reach back and talk about or think about their biological families?
Okay, so can I add to that? Because what you said is really interesting because one of the mangaka, his name is Ichiro Oda, he writes One Piece and it's like the longest running manga like ever. And I think it's also like the best-selling work of fiction like in the world ever, but neither here nor there. One of the things that he points out in his stories and his interviews is that there are no mothers in his stories because he's like, basically, moms take the fun out of everything. That's literally like their job, right? And so I think it's interesting, Laura, that you pointed that out because it's just kind of like, I feel like so many times people also in books and fiction like to focus on the found family because it's just like feelings of like missing your family. It's just like, those are sad. That's not fun. That's not adventure. We don't want to focus on that. We want to focus on, oh, we have friends. Like, well, what about your mom, homie? Like she was out here cutting off her last leg to feed you. Like, are we not going to talk about this? And how much we're not gonna send her a letter, we're not gonna call home, nothing, none of that. Like even when things get better, it's usually like at the end of a series or end of a trilogy or whatever, it's just like, oh, and then I saw my mom and everything was okay. And I'm like, did your mom not wonder where you were for 3 months? Like what happened to this? And I found it interesting because it's just kind of like that's so true. Like no one ever thinks like to call home. Like, is the brother okay? Is the auntie okay? Is mom, dad, sister? What happened to them? They just disappeared. Like you disappeared one day and nobody cared. Nobody came looking for you. Okay, we're just gonna accept that as fact. That's fine.
Yeah, all right. That was some excellent discussion about the different ways that found families can take form, including wonderful examples in both cartoons, anime, and in written works. And yes, One Piece is amazing. Um, as we start coming to a close for this panel, I want to go ahead and segue into the final question, which I've saved the best, in my opinion, for last, which is, though I know Chelsea's talked about this a bit already, but what are your favorite examples of the found family trope?
Well, since I've already played my hand, I'm just gonna just repeat it for longevity purposes. Most of my favorite found family tropes come from anime, so definitely One Piece, also like Fairy Tale and Black Clover, and I also like the less traditional ones, the more obscure ones. So the one I'm kind of obsessed with right now is Bungo Stray Dogs, and how you have these two opposite entities within the show. Basically, you have the good guys who are the armed detective agency, and then you have the bad guys, which are the port mafia, and how they frequently have to come together because they have similar goals and they have very similar values. It's just the ways they go about them are very usually on opposite ends. Very to go back to what Basil said, Magneto and Professor X in the way that they handle things, but the two main characters, Akutagawa and Atsushi, love them together. I know that means nothing to anyone who has not seen Bungo Stray Dogs, but if you're into anime, then definitely one that I recommend because the found family there, I feel like has layers to it. And I personally love any found family story that is like, it's not as straightforward as, oh, I found you, you found me. Now we are best friends on this adventure and we're locked in for life. I love it when it's like, I like you sometimes, but other times I just kind of want to punch you in the throat. I like that complexity.
I read mostly in young adult nowadays. I didn't used to, but once I started writing young adult, I started reading a lot of young adult. And I think some of my favorites are where there's a group of teenagers that are banding together. And I know some people think it's ridiculous, like where they like suddenly don't need adults and they can just do whatever they want and know all these things that 17-year-olds shouldn't know how to do, but I just love it. So some of my favorites would include, Six of Crows is a really obvious example, doing the whole assassin and banding together for, one big heist goal. The Gilded Wolves has a similar kind of dynamic and situation. And then Incendiary is one I really enjoyed recently. So yeah, the young adults that don't really act too much like young adults is fun.
So I'm going to go ahead and make the bold statement that nothing and nobody does found family better than middle grade fiction. And I definitely vibe with what both of you have said so far. I'm going to call out a couple of other marginalized authors that have done in their middle grade fiction a fantastic representation of the found family trope and in different ways and with different, I guess, species. Because one, Adriana Cuevas did the Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez, which is this kid who finds out that he can talk to animals. And so they become a little found family group together, and it's just so charming and so fantastic. And then there's Sal and Gabby Break the Universe by Carlos Hernandez, which is just chaotic and wonderful. And these two individuals who are rivals and become this found family is just so excellently written. And so for anyone who wants to study this trope, those two books put on like a master class.
I'm also a big fan of the I'm building a team trope. Um, so definitely Six of Crows is one of my favorites. But I do enjoy the messy teenager, team that they're trying to do something and really don't know what they're doing. So like one of the biggest influences to my current writing was the Raven Cycle series by Maggie Stiefvater. And that's just because every one of those kids has an issue that they definitely should be seeking professional help for. And everybody's parents also needs to seek professional help. But they don't. They use magic instead. So I think that I can relate to that as well. Because I mean that's kind of what it was like living with ADHD unmedicated for I don't know, however many years. But I really enjoy this like the messiest version of, oh, I have to get this task done and I need 4 or 5 people to help me. I'm gonna go find 4 or 5 other people that are just as, need as much help as I do to kind of fit the pieces together and get it done. And it always seems to work out best in my opinion, but I mean I really don't know. Um, but those are definitely the books that I enjoy immensely. So like yeah, Six of Crows and the Raven Cycle are very much a fun time. But then I also like the stories that are kind of like again, not so much found family as in new people, but like refound family, like, oh, my family or the people I love are finally seeing me in the light that I wanted them to see me. Like they're finally seeing me. So I think my favorite book of that would be Cemetery Boys. And that's really because like this kid, I mean, he was struggling the whole book, but by the end it's like, oh, my dad, he finally sees me for who I am and he finally, like accepts me, and I have, all these new friends that get my struggle, and his cousin is ride or die from beginning to end, and it's like it's really nice to see that kind of come together when you think you're alone and you figure out like, oh, actually they just needed time to get to where I needed them to be, and now I can meet them there. So I really like that idea of found family as well.
I think I'm gonna take from what Aram was saying about finding families when you've been away, sort of like that theme. So not so much found families. So like in romance, there's a trope where a small town girl returns home and she has this big job, she leaves that, comes back, and she finds love in the small town that she thought she was escaping her whole life. um Not so much that particular trope, but like I like the idea of people going back to, and I think it's because I'm an immigrant and I'm always searching for that identity, and that that family that I've left behind that's not with me anymore. Trying to find pieces of that, because like, where do you belong? Like, you don't belong here. When you go back home, it's even harder because things have changed so much and your friends have left. And so it's like a weird conundrum, like being an immigrant. So I like when people go back home and then they find pieces of, like, the community that they left, that they thought was not there anymore, but they still find people there who reminisce. Like when I go back home, people still remember my father and like things that he did, and there's comfort in that because he's gone, but there's pieces of him still left with people that he was kind to and things like that. So, and a movie that I recently saw was a Turkish movie about a woman who's grieving her mother's death, and she comes back home and she finds this connection with bees, and like she's a beekeeper, and like how she sort of heals when she's going through that process and she reconnects with her roots. So I don't know if it's found family per se, but something similar to empathy and finding identity.
I think reconnection is a good word for it. I feel like that's kind of what I'm thinking of too. And I kind of like when I write it in my work, I usually honestly think about it from like a trans point of view of like post transition, pre transition of like the family you had before that versus the family you have after, because more often than not, it gets smaller or it starts to look different. There's different people now involved or who want to be involved or who are accepting and not accepting, etc. So I think reconnecting is a good word too, because it's like, well, you're introducing your true self to these people who never knew you and thought they did. So it's not like meeting new people where you form these new connections that don't have old, foundations that you're building over. So it's brand new and it's a lot cleaner, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas reconnecting, it takes new materials to build over an old foundation. And that can be difficult for a lot of people, but it still does, when you become your true self, you kind of think of, well, who are the people who are going to be around me and be my corner? Who is my community? And that, in being, Black or Indigenous, etc., especially in, marginalized communities that are more conservative or have, these more conservative views, like, especially like me growing up in a Mexican family that was very Catholic. There are a lot of conservative views that come with that. And then also a Black grandmother that was very Christian. There are conservative views that come with that. And having to reintroduce yourself to these people, it's going to be a newer connection or it isn't. Like everything has to be pretty brand new, and that doesn't always work out. But I feel like it does kind of still feel like found family when you rediscover these people and realize, oh, they still love me. Like we can still have a relationship, and it's not going to look the same, um, but it's going to be a relationship nonetheless. So I feel like that still kind of fits in that idea of, oh, I found my people. Like I have to go out and find my people, and then I found them. So that kind of just it follows the same roadmap, so to speak. It just doesn't start the same. So
Yeah, like in my book, the male character, he's adopted by it's a family adoption, but he hates his family that he thinks has given him up. And like he's all these issues. My publisher initially wanted me to end the story here because it's a love story, make the resolution here, and I kept saying he has to go back home. He has to reconnect with those people that he thinks are evil, but really they had his good intentions at heart. So I think it's kind of like like what RM was saying in terms of like how he's changed as a person, and he wants to go back home to like reconnect with them and see how they have like maybe changed, or their intentions have changed, and how they perceive him now, and how his perceptions of them may not be completely accurate.
And I think that makes a lot of sense, especially like, for adoption cases. True, because now you're an adult, so you get to choose your family. So if you choose to continue a relationship with them, I feel like that's still found family. Like you're still choosing to be around these people, to have these people in your life. So I definitely think that that fits under the trope. It just looks different because obviously, the connotations of the trope, the name of it, are very set in a lot of places. But I mean, you can argue underneath that umbrella forever as to what found family is. So I definitely think that would qualify as like, we're reconnecting with people we don't know. Because I mean, even if they're, your blood family, you don't know them. And you get to choose now in meeting these people for the first time. Do I want to have these people around? You're not obligated to have them around. You're not obligated to stay. And you're not, even if you grow up with them or not, but like it's just one of those things where yeah, we basically all want to believe like the easiest thing is you're born into a family that's perfect and loves you exactly the way you need to be loved and can give you, fulfill your needs. That's not always the truth. So to be able to go out and say like, oh, I met my biological family, or I met, these cousins that I never met before, and now, they're gonna be in my life. I'm choosing to let them be in my life. I think that still falls under found family.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jessica, did you want to add something to the conversation?
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, 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 go ahead.
Um, my favorite found families are the ones that aren't like a traditional family. So, less Oliver and Company and more girl and her giant snake type deal. As for a book example, I think The Scapegracers, by H.A. Clark is a great example of this because it's a witch coven, and the main character originally thinks the other three coven members are like really kind of snooty and bratty and like the popular people. But then when she gets to know them, then she realizes that they are just people. And so they end up becoming really great friends and a witch coven. And so I tend to gravitate to found family stories like that, where you have some sort of preconceived notion about someone, and then as you get to know them, then they end up becoming your people.
Wonderful, wonderful. These have all been truly excellent examples and even more books for me to read. Yay! I love reading. So we've reached the end of our questions and pretty much reached the end of the panel. So I just want to take this moment now. We're going to go back around. And if you have anything you want to share, call to action, any sort of reminders for the viewers, now is the time. So we will start it off again with Chelsea.
All right. So, just to say it out there, put it out in the ether one more time. My name is Chelsea. I go by CM Lockhart on the internet. I have 2 books out. The debut was We Are the Origin, that came out last year, June 2022. And the second book, We Are Dying Gods, is coming out August of 2023. And they've got assassins, polyamorous gods. We've got a little bit of past tensing on page. We've got giant man-eating monsters. We've got found families. We've got established romances. We've got, girls lusting after very handsome boys. There's a lot going on, and it's fun. It's a journey, and it's a story that I'm really proud of. So if you're into any of that, feel free to check it out. Like I said, I'm also a podcaster and YouTuber. I'm also the founder of the Melanin Library, which I don't think I mentioned in the beginning. And it's an online database of books written by Black authors. It's an absolutely free resource. So if you're looking to diversify your bookshelf, just head to melaninlibrary.com. And we have over 3,000 books on the site, and we are constantly growing. So yeah. And my podcast, Written in Melanin Podcast, is a place where I talk about all things Black and bookish. Comes out every other week on Wednesdays. So thank you guys for having me. I'm glad to be a part of this discussion, to have met everyone, and I'm looking forward to reading all of your books.
Excellent, excellent. Laura?
Yeah. So I'm on submission now, which means start looking out for my books in like 2 years or longer, because that's how this thing goes. But I guess my comic book will be out in all the places comic books are sold. It's coming out, it's debuting this fall at New York Comic Con, so that's exciting. And it's part of the new Latino universe called The 13 by Chase Buck Comics. So please support by reading all those origin stories of teenagers. It's basically Mexican X-Men is what's happening here. So mine's called Mold. And you can find me across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at Laura Galán-Wells. It's my name. And I just realized is mine backwards? Mine's backwards. And my website is lauragalánwells.com. And on TikTok, I've been doing like these like book cover cosplays that I've started doing, which is really fun, where I try to coordinate with the book cover. So hit me up if you want me to do your book cover. And I'm going to start doing a series talking about queering and R&Rs because I had a lot of experience with both when I was queering, trying to find an agent.
Fun, fun. I'm definitely gonna have to check that out on TikTok while it still exists. Next up, George.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. So I'm George Jreije. I'm the author of Shad Hadid and the Alchemist of Alexandria. So if you want a really fun middle grade found family that can replace the other big, massive middle grade that shall not be named by a very mean author, this is the one. So check out this series. The second book comes out October 17th. So be sure to buy it at your local bookstore, get it from a library, get it online, wherever. And you can find me on all socials at BY by George Jreije.
Great. Next up, Jessica.
I'm Jessica. I'm the author of Bad Witch Burning. You can buy that anywhere books are sold. And then Monstrous is coming out September the 12th. And you can watch my social media. There'll be some goodies and stuff as soon as I get my life together and get all the pre-order stuff together. But if you like giant snakes and revenge plots and sapphic girlies who are simps for their girlfriends, then you would love Monstrous. And then I also write middle grade. If you like cats, these are the books for you. They're all about cats. And you can get them in the Scholastic Book Fair. My socials on Twitter is at JLou100. And then on Instagram, I'm not really on it that much, but if you want to say hello, it's author Jessica Lewis on there.
Great, great. Up next is Noreen.
Hi, everyone. My debut book, The Misarrangement of Sana Saeed, is coming out in October 10th to be precise. It is, like I've said before, it's a romance. It's a Desi romance about a hijabi girl, Sana, as you can see on the cover, and her childhood sweetheart, Daniel. And if you like Bollywood, if you like a lot of Desi food, if you like chai, if you like persuasion, if you like swoony romances with HEAs, this would be the book for you. It also deals a lot with intergenerational trauma and immigrants and how immigrant communities, when they come, they try to find, whatever they left behind here and as they start their lives here. And it's about friendships and lots of food. I am on Twitter at Noreen Mughees, NoreenMughees, and I'm on Insta at Noreen Lekak, Noreen_LEKHAK. So hit me up, and if you have any questions about querying, submissions, been there, done that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, great. All right. And for our final panelist, RM.
Yes, thank you. So again, my name is RM Virtues. You can find me on TikTok, Twitter for now, Tumblr, Instagram at RM Virtues. You can also join me at Patreon, which would be great. Also slash RM Virtues, where I write basically bonus chapters for all my books, background and lore, writing posts. I also do serial stories there, and you can actually read my upcoming book, What We Call Worship, which is completed on Patreon because it started as a serial. And then you can also read the books that I have out right now, including my Gods of Hunger series, which is again a queer BIPOC retelling or reimagining of the Greek pantheon. Um, you can find all of my books at my website, rmvirtues.com, as well as like Patreon information and all of that. I also have an Etsy store that you can find via my website, which has signed paperbacks and then a couple of merch items. For the moment, there'll be more added. Uh, and I mean, basically, if you do like queer BIPOC characters creating and recreating their families in their image, then my books would be for you. And also, if you like monster romance about sleep paralysis demons and ancient gods, also be up your alley as well. But yeah, you can follow along with my newsletter or Patreon or my social media to keep up with me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Just want to take a moment and thank all of our panelists for being here and to you, the viewer, for watching this recording. So thank you so much. And hopefully you are also attending the conference when this will be aired so that you can ask any sort of questions that you might have after having viewed this video. Thank you.